Mr Johnson, you've spent 20 years as an MP in one of the most solidly Labour places in the country. Do you feel like voters in areas like Hull are losing their connection with the party?
No, I don't. In fact, in Hull, there's a renaissance going on, and it didn't happen by accident. You know, we're the UK City of Culture this year. You'll have to come up. Sophie, we got this huge investment by Siemens, biggest investment anywhere in the world. We've had £3 billion of investment in the city since City of Culture was announced. Thousands of jobs being created. It was all part of a plan. It was a part of a plan by the Labour Council and Labour MPs. So, no, quite the opposite. There is a renaissance here, and it's, in a way, we've got our own little ecosystem up here in Hull. We're geographically isolated, and we've been doing it for ourselves and doing it with some success.
You talk about the success in Hull, but the bigger picture, if you look at the local elections, may not be quite so rosy. Now, you're somebody who grew up in quite a working class area in the Notting Hill slums. You were looked after by your 16-year-old sister after your mother died. Does it worry you that Labour is at risk of losing touch with its kind of working class traditional voters?
Yes, it does, because we've got no God-given right to represent those communities, and we must never be blasé and complacent about the trust. But, you know, you look from my childhood onwards, the huge improvements, social improvements, both in terms of housing, but also in terms of the way that black people, the way that women were treated back in the 50s, the way the disabled were treated. All of those have been an advance on social issues, and most of them, I have to say, led by the Labour Party. But, you know, not too long ago, there was the prediction that because UKIP was now being led by a Scouser with working class credentials, we were going to lose all this support to UKIP. We had dreadful results last week, but UKIP, in a sense, had worse results. And where we worked really hard, I saw you just talking to Anna Soubry, not far from there in Gedling, we held all 7 Labour seats on Nottinghamshire Council because we had a great local MP, Vernon Coker, and great local councillors who were working hard. And that's going to pay dividends, I hope. Certainly Jeremy Corbyn now, over the next 32 days, has a huge opportunity which he needs to take. The leader of the Labour Party, unlike some of the smaller parties and other parties, people judge them on, do I want that person to be Prime Minister? And that's what Jeremy's got to show in the run-up to June the 8th.
And do you think that people want Jeremy Corbyn to be Prime Minister?
Do I think he wants to be Prime Minister? Yes. You don't run for...
Do you think people want him to be
Party
Prime
Minister?
Minister?
You want to be... I'm sorry, Sophie. Oh, do I think people want him to be
Sorry,
Prime
I was saying, do you think that other people want him to be Prime Minister?
Sorry, Sophie, yeah. That's the acid test. That's what he has to demonstrate. Not just to, you know, hundreds of supporters at rallies in safe Labour territory. We have to win Stevenage. We have to win the Milton Keynes seats. We have to win those seats that you have to if you're going to be a party of government. And we are a party of government. That's what we were created for. So he has to. He has to prove that. And there's been a lot of talk about not getting enough exposure and Jeremy not being able to kind of get his message across. And certainly I find lots of young people have been excited by Jeremy Corbyn in a way perhaps I'm immune to, given my age. But here's a chance for him to do that, and he has to grasp that because Labour still, in terms of left-of-centre politics, we have a great deal to offer, and I would have huge traumas and trepidation about the next 3, 4, 5 years, which are going to be very difficult for this country, without Labour having a voice in government.
You'd say that Jeremy Corbyn needs to kind of prove himself to the voters. Today we've got a policy out from Labour saying that they're guaranteeing no income tax rises for people on under £80,000 a year. Are you happy with the idea that that's leaving the door open to tax rises to those on over £80,000?
Well, 2 things about this. First of all, I think we have to be clear that we're not looking to lower the upper threshold of 150,000. I think that would be a mistake for the kind of seats that we need to win across the country. And because, in terms of how we operate, people know that we've got lots of policies to spend money. We have to show that we've got policies to save money as well. But I would say this, there's been a lot of dishonesty about tax and a lot of mistakes made. I think David Cameron and George Osborne made a fundamental mistake by pledging in 2015 that there would be no increase in any taxes when we knew we were heading into difficult economic headwinds, and now we know we've got the added problem of leaving the European Union, which is at some stage, believe me, going to cause even more problems. We're already all 15% poorer because of the pound's devaluation. So actually treating the electorate as if they are too infantile to understand that at some stage you may need to put up taxes to deal with these problems, whether it's in the NHS or whether it's in adult social care or anywhere else. So I'm glad that we are being clear about this and not just going in like Trappist monks on tax and saying, everything will be fine and we won't raise any taxes. I think what the Conservatives are going to try and do is say as little as possible. And in a sense, that's not being honest with the electorate about the economic period that we face.
You're talking about the economic period that we face, of course, with Brexit looming. How worried are you about the shape of Brexit if Theresa May does walk away from this election with a big majority, which is, of course, what the polls suggest is going to happen?
Well, I do worry about it, and I think a big majority for Theresa May, unlike Anna Soubry says she's a one-nation Tory, everything I've been hearing is this kind of imbecilic, chauvinistic kind of appeal to the Daily Mail. That's not bringing the country together. Her job is to bring the country together, and the country is very divided over this. We know we're leaving the European Union, but we shouldn't adopt UKIP's manifesto, who claimed that leaving the single market was what we voted on, leaving the customs union was what we voted on, leaving the European Medicines Agency, or anything with Europe in front of it. I'm encouraged by her letter to Donald Tusk, which had a much more reasoned view about this and accepted that it would be disastrous, frankly, if we left the European Union with no deal and went to WTO figures. I'm also encouraged by David Davis, who's an MP not far from here, I've worked with over the years. He seems to be accepting the need in negotiation not to just shout and bawl and say what you want to do and not just be bloody difficult, but actually to craft a solution and to work with our European unions, not as these Johnny foreigners that we need to run rings round, this imbecilic stuff that we hear, but as people we have to forge a new partnership with, because we might be leaving the European Union, but we're not leaving the continent, and what happens on the continent of Europe will affect us. So I've got mixed views about how she's approached this. What she says and what she does are two entirely different things. But what I do know is a huge majority for the Conservative Party, who in a sense have just fought a battle with UKIP, which they seem to have won on the local election results. But look at the devastation around us that we're potentially facing in a divided country that doesn't look like being reunited anytime soon.
You see, you say that you're worried about Theresa May's negotiating strategy. But from the public's perspective, if you look at the polls, if you look at the local election results, it looks as though they trust Theresa May over Jeremy Corbyn to handle those negotiations. Now, in the past, you've described Jeremy Corbyn, the leader of the Labour Party, as a man who is totally incompetent and incapable. I mean, how can you ask people to vote for a man who you've described in those terms?
I'm not standing in this election. It's a pleasure to be talking to you, but I said that when it was a leadership election. And I said in the two leadership elections, I was supporting other candidates, and that was part of my view. But he won, so now here's his big chance. I think you're right about Theresa May and the way she has projected this, because in a sense, she's managed to get those people who want a soft Brexit, let's talk in those terms, that she should have a big majority because that will give her some control over the swivel-eyed ones on her own backbenches. And she's also managed to convince the people who want a hard Brexit that she should have a majority because that's what she believes in as well. So I think she's been very clever and very astute in the way she's positioned herself, but it is just positioning. And I think what we'll find over the next 32 days up to June the 8th is the British public kind of see through things when they're just there as a kind of image. They get to the thrust of this. Now, Theresa May's refused to have take part in the debates. I think that says a lot about how worried she is and about how keen she is to keep an image, a facade. She's also made a lot of errors, I think, in terms of her record as Home Secretary. You know, it's not impeccable. She said she'd get net migration down to the tens of thousands. It's actually at record levels. It's a whole series of other things that have happened on her watch. So all of that tends to get exposed and kind of damage the veneer that spin doctors, etc., we've done the same in the past, try to put on a leader. So I think she's vulnerable to that, which is why I think the period up to June the 8th is going to be really interesting. And maybe we'll see a bit, I mean, half the people who will vote at the general election voted in these local elections this week. No one around Hull, none of the big cities really, apart from the mayoral elections, most of which we won. So, you know, I don't think these kind of predictions of this landslide are built on anything much more than a bit of wishful thinking in some aspects of the print media.
It's a very optimistic note you're striking. At the same time, though, we have seen Labour voters deserting the party in its heartlands and places like Nottingham, where we are today. There seems to be a kind of struggle over Brexit. A very quick thought from you just to end, Mr Johnson. Is this a battle for the very existence of the Labour Party?
Yes, it is, because you lose 2 elections, and that's bad enough. To lose 3 elections on the trot at such a difficult period for our country. That's why Jeremy Corbyn's got to step up to the plate. That's why he's got to show that he can do all the things that his supporters believe he can do. It is an existential threat to the party.